Today is Saturday, February the 9th, and I'm going to take a look at the same 6 stocks that we always look at, starting with the S&P 500. And I haven't shown you this before, but back between January of 2018 and early October of 2018, we had what's called a butterfly pattern, where price dropped on the first leg down to here. We call this the X point and this the A point. And it rose to 78.6, which is a critical Fibonacci level, before retreating down and completing an 88.6 retracement of the B to A length. So as soon as you see something coming back to 61.8, 38, 61.8, 78.6, that's setting up for 3 types of generally termed Gartley patterns, but this is the butterfly, and the 61.8 is the Gartley, and the 38.2 is, I can't remember. So you want to start watching for support anywhere in this zone right here would be acceptable for a butterfly pattern. This is automatically generated by the motive wave program, which is fantastic. Then when we saw this turnaround here, we would have drawn the butterfly pattern and known that our eventual target was going to be up here at around 2600. And that is what happened, isn't it? It went up there and it hit that 2600 pattern, which is the bottom of an acceptable range for a completed butterfly, and it just stalled at that point. So if you're watching this butterfly pattern, you could have been doing some selling here. So let's now look at where we are today. And since last week, we've been saying that because of the Chiku span, this light blue here running into the cloud, and because of this flat cloud, and flat clouds are like magnets, they pull price towards them. That's the Ichimoku theory. Then we could expect a pullback sometime into the end of February. And that appears to be what's playing out here. Now this green line is the weekly level. If you look at the SPX on the week, we got rejection last week. This week. We saw the rejection just at the top of the weekly cloud, and we started this pullback. So we have confirmation from the daily saying that a flat cloud will pull price down, and we have confirmation on the weekly showing that we pretty much came very close to the top of that flat portion of the cloud, and we would expect it to be pulling back. And that's what we're seeing this week. So what do we think is happening next week? Well, given all the news about China and other unsettling economic news, forget that there's a strong economy. There's still a lot of nervousness among traders and economists, and we're going to see this downward channeling playing out, is what I believe. Let's just take a quick look at the 5-minute. We can see that the 5-minute on Friday provided resistance until we had a breakout. The 15-minute provided resistance for a while, and then we had the end of the last 15 minutes of the day, we had some buying. 30-minute I rarely look at, and the 1 hour proved to be where the S&P saw its maximum on Friday. So all those time frames came into play throughout the day, and just go to show you that the Ichimoku system really works. Let's take a look at Apple, and let's look at Apple on a 1-day basis. And we got the Apple here in the cloud, and it's messing things up for us to see a little bit. So let's just go through our time frames first. 5 minutes was a pretty drifting day, and the 5 minutes provided resistance and then support later on in the last 15 minutes before that little pop. The 15 minutes never really came into play, but it will on Monday. The 30-minute, where did we end up the end of the day on Friday? Resting exactly on the top of the cloud. So what does this tell us about Monday? Let's get rid of the cloud so that so we're in the cloud. Granted, we're in the cloud. We don't need to see it in that case on the daily chart. Let's take it out and let's see where we are. We've still got a gap up here that hasn't been filled. We had rejection at that gap. Let me take this out of the way so we can see a little bit better. We had rejection at that gap, and now we have a pullback towards this blue line, which is the 50-day moving average. I just seem to think because of the resistance we saw on the earlier charts that next week is going to be an Apple nothing week. I really don't think very much is going to happen. And as a result, I've gotten rid of 3/4 of my shares. But what I have done is I've sold puts at 170 and 172.5 because if Apple does go below 172.5 or stays above 170, I'll get to keep the premium, and I'm quite happy at what my net price would be when I get assigned my stock at those levels, especially if I'm wrong and the price is going up. So let's go to the next one. T, again, sort of boring, but I would want to show you something on T because I often show you gaps, right? Gaps are when we have a big change between the low of one day and the high of another day, right at the open. A lot of theorists will tell you that these tails count in determining if gaps have been closed. So you don't have to have candles that come all the way up to the top to this level right here. That maybe you only need a candle to come to this level. Well, I can show you 3 gaps in the AT&T chart that show that that's exactly what happened. So we went from this bottom to this top in 4 weeks, and we saw a rejection. So we can call that gap filled. AT&T again, 12 days to go from the bottom of this gap candle to the top of this gap candle, and then down. So let's call that one filled. And then this one, it got filled quite nicely by this full drop here. But we could also say that it was probably considered filled in 5 days when this tail top matched this tail bottom. That's pretty much all I have to say about T. Flat tops attract, so I think we may see some upward drifting motion in T. It's really a nice dividend stock, and that's why I like it, and sometimes I sell calls against it. Caterpillar ended up the day having bounced within the cloud up to the top of the cloud. We're still in the gap here, but if we took the AT&T rule, we would say that we closed the gap back here with the top of this tail, the bottom of this tail, and the top of this tail. So gap closed, on our way down, bounce on the cloud. Let's look at the 5-minute. 5-minute provided a pivot point, a bounce right there at the end of the day. The 15-minute provided resistance for us right at the end. So the day closed on a 15-minute bottom of a cloud resistance. Interesting, huh? I think it's really interesting. And the 1 hour shows us that we passed through the cloud right here, right where resistance is the least, because the resistance is only a hair's width as the cloud A span and B span are inverting. And that is exactly where price dropped. And that was on our earnings day. So if we'd been looking at the cloud on earnings day, we could have said, gee, we're setting ourselves up for not much support. And that's what happened. Gone down, bounced back up, down, up again, flat clouds attract. There's a possibility to see Caterpillar moving up on a 1 hour basis. And on a 1 day basis, we've shown that we have cloud support here. So bullish on Caterpillar. INTL. I said that I would be a buyer of INTL once it crossed 50.97 because that's the top of the cloud for a 1 week basis. And you can see that we've been drifting in the cloud, the weekly cloud, since September the 10th, randomly drifting with a general upwards direction, but nonetheless not making the breakout. In fact, this week saw a high near the top of the cloud, but then it got pulled down. So that's all I can say about INTL, just looking at it. I think it's going to be a buy above 50.97, but I'm not touching it until then. Western Digital. I like Western Digital simply because I just think that it's a good stock. Once the China things get cleaned up, I think this stock is going to do very well. It's still battling with this gap. I don't see anywhere where we could say that gap has been filled here or here. So I believe, since we're still getting rejection here and here, that traders are thinking this is a gap that they're going to stay away from for a while until volume actually comes in, and there hasn't been any above average volume except for this day, which was a selling day. And this was a selling day back here. So we haven't seen buyers really enthusiastic about the stock for a while. 5-minute chart showed cloud resistance, cloud support, and then a breakaway, and a nice finish to the day. The 15-minute showed resistance 1, 2, 3, 4 times, so over an hour. And then we finished just on the edge here. So come Monday, regardless of whether it's up or down, we're going to be exiting over the cloud, and we may have magnetic attraction down to this flat cloud, but we certainly have the Chiku span, which is running up, and if price continues to go up, it's going to find resistance against the cloud. And remember, the Chiku span is a reflection of where price ended for the day at the top of the candle. So that's simply that. So once we have candles out here, we're going to shift our gaze back to the Chiku span and see how the Chiku gets influenced by this cloud. So that's it for today. A little bit longer than usual.